video that you're about to watch, Fur, Feathers, and Fins, was filmed at the home and studio of Frank Russell, a champion carver, carving instructor, and author of many books on how to carve. It will show you in detail how to use power carving and texturing tools, and take you step by step through 3 carving projects: a cottontail rabbit, a mallard drake duck, and a smallmouth bass, all carved from simple blocks of tupelo. We hope that you will enjoy and learn from the time you spend with Frank, whether you are new to carving or wish to learn some new techniques from a master.
Hello, my name is Frank Russell, and I'd like to welcome you to the world of power carving. I've been a power carver for 25 years, and I've pretty much used Fordham machinery and accessories exclusively. On this particular time together, I'd like to not only introduce the machinery, the environment, and the accessories, but I'd like to carve at least 3 wood carving projects with you. The first we're going to carve will be a cottontail rabbit. The second one we carve will be a mallard drake duck. And the third one we carve will be a smallmouth bass. So why don't you join me now? We'll go into the studio and we'll begin our time together. I'd like to start by introducing the SR flexible shaft machine by Fordham. I've had these machines in my school for 15 years. They are the workhorse to any power carver. This particular machine now runs at 18,000 RPM, has 1/6 horse, and will deliver all the power you need to do any handheld carving. It's used for hogging out, which is a term for roughing out, and it can be used for detailing, for finish work, right through to completing the carving by texturing. Now, to talk about the machine itself, you have, of course, a power cord. Then you go to the motor itself. Attached to the motor is a flexible shaft from whence the machine gets its name. The flexible shaft is within a rubber or plastic sheath, which leads to the handpiece. Now, there are various models available of flexible shaft machines, as there are a wide selection of handpieces to go with the flexible shaft machines. The handpieces are very easily removed. There's no mechanical item that has to be adjusted. It's just a simple pull. And once you put it back on, what I usually do, there's a key here, and within the handpiece is a keyway. And I usually just set it on there and then twist the bit with my thumb, and you can see how it just slid on, and then just push it on with a click and you're done. The SR, what that stands for is the S is the model of the machine, the R means that it can be reversed. Now, the reverse, for the most part, is more applicable to left-handed carvers. By the nature of the beast, this machine, when it's running forward, has to be cutting so that the cut is on the bottom and it's coming toward your face. That's the nature of the beast. If you're left-handed and you move it this way, it'll be running opposite for left-handers unless you put it in reverse. And because of that, it'll be running away from you all the time. I'd like to address the longevity of them at this time, just because they go and go and go. They have taken more abuse over the years by students and by me, just in testing the how far the machine can go, the extremes of the machine. Let me show you how I set up my workstation for power carving. First of all, for the flexible shaft, we're going to need a motor hanger or some kind of containment feature for the flexible shaft motor. Next, you're going to need an area where you can keep all your bits. I'll go into the bits after. Here I have a bit tray, and these were the same bits that I have put out for all my students ever since I started the school. Of most importance is a dust collector. Some way to contain and get rid of dust. This I built into the tabletop. Let me move this slightly. And this is nothing more than a motor pan that you can get at any store that supplies dust collectors and accessories. And rather than have a blast gate, which usually goes underneath, I wanted something that was simple, so I have a racket ball to stop the air. And you'll see how this functions later on. Because I'm getting older, because my eyes are getting weaker, I have to get more power to see with, and I use these optivisors. Now, what you want to do is select an optivisor that will allow you to work magnified at a comfortable position as you normally carve. Now you can tell what the magnification is on each lens of these. There's the lens and then there's a headpiece. In the upper left hand corner is a small number that tells you what the magnification is. I have gone from a 3 to now this is a 4, and when I do competition work, I sometimes, for the finer detail, I use a number 7. But this, if you have eyes that are weak or failing, try these. Now, safety. We have to discuss not only the dust collector, but eye protection. This is, if these glasses that I have are safety glasses, but if you don't wear glasses, or even if you do wear glasses and they're not safety glasses, get a pair of safety glasses with a holding cord that you can take them off periodically and hang them down when you're doing other work. Now, even though we have a dust collector here, we also want to consider the use of a dust mask. This is a particulate mask, and the reason you want this is you can see the dust going through this dust collector, but that's not the dust you want to fear. The fearful dust is what you can't see, that's air-laden dust. Along with sight, you want a light that you can direct, that's a strong light, and we'll get more and more into the use of this particular light at a later time when we're texturing hair, or fur rather, or when we're texturing feathers, or when we're texturing scales on the fish. This is of utmost importance. Plus, if you can illuminate, the more illumination for an area, the better, as far as my old eyes are concerned. I'd like to talk with you now about the bits that we use for wood carving. The selection you see in front of you will allow you to carve any carving that you can hold in your hands. Bits are described by 3 different methods: by shape, by size of shank, and by grit or material that that's used to grind with or cut with. Let me first go over the shapes. This is a flame shape. This is a tapered. This is a ball or sphere. This is a round nose, or some folks call it a bull nose, and this is a cylinder. The cylinders come in with grit on the tip rather, or without. And when it comes without, that's called a smooth end bit. They are available in 1/4 inch, in 1/8 inch, and 3/32 inch. Now, those are the 3 sizes that we use primarily in wood carving. This particular collection is what each of my students, when they came to my school, would find in front of them to use for the week seminars that we did. So let's get into these. The more aggressive ones in the back, the 1/4-inch Typhoons. The red are the most aggressive, whereas the blue are a little less aggressive, coarse and fine. Then there's the 1/8-inch, and as you're roughing out the work to begin with to waste away, you'll be using the 1/4-inch, because these are the ones that introduce the power, that allow you to remove the most all at once, because there's more surface to grind away because of their size. Then as you begin to reduce the size and begin to introduce detail within the carving, we'll go to the 1/8 shapes, or 1/8 shafted bits of various shapes, and begin to refine the rough shaping that we did with the larger bits. Then when we get down into the really fine, we will use either the smallest of the Typhoon bits, or we will go into the ruby carvers. Now, along with these, and I'll show you the importance, if you notice within here, you will see all kinds of flame shapes. And the flame shape, to me, is the most versatile and most useful bit shape of all. I'd like to talk with you about the importance of the flame shape on any bit. If you noticed within my bit tray, there were more flame shapes than any other shape that I have. And the reason for this is because of the different strokes that you can make in the different shapes with the flame shape. Let me show you. By holding my handpiece at a high angle and making my cut, I can make the equivalent of a V shape, which I'll show you after for a close-up. By holding my handpiece at a low angle and making a draw stroke or a drag stroke, I can make the equivalent of a U gouge. You can see the first cut I made with a high angle handpiece is the shape of a V gouge or a parting tool, and the second cut that I made by holding the handpiece at a low angle is a U cut or a U gouge cut. There's two parts of the versatility of a flame shape. Now, once I do a relief cut such as a V cut or a U cut, when I want to waste away, I will hold my handpiece in a knife grip, and I'll just waste away by wipe stroking into the shapes that I want. And I'll do this quickly just to show you that within this one bit you have the equivalent of 3 hand tools. We have a series of tapered fluted bits in the front here. These are, I use them pretty much exclusively for shaping feathers. Then here you see 3 little diamond bits, and these diamond bits, there's a flame shape, there's an inverted cone, and there's a little ball. With those 3 bits right there, you can put fine detail, hair relieving, hair splits, but most of all what these are used for are putting in nostrils for animals, humans, even bird and duck nostrils. These 6 bits right here are commonly called stones because of the grit that's in them. These are Ceram Cuts, and they are a little more aggressive than other stones with a different composition. I'd like to describe more what the shapes are and what they do. You'll see here a large cylinder and a small cylinder. a large inverted cone, and a small inverted cone. These 4 bits right here are used for texturing hair, fur, or feathers on about any handheld carving project that you might want. The round ball is used for not only smoothing and outlining feathers, but you can, on smaller birds, outline the feathers and raise them away from the body before you texture them. The flame-shaped ceram cut or flame-shaped stone here, again, is used for not only relieving away feathers, but smoothing under overcuts, for example, up under a wing, or perhaps around where the tail coverts meet the rectices or the tail feathers.
Let's take another look at Frank's bit collection. In the back row, there are the largest of the Typhoon Burs. They have 1/4-inch shanks. They come in blue, a fine grit, and red, a coarse grit, and they're used for roughing out and wasting away material. The third row also has Typhoon Burs, but these are smaller, and they have 1/8-inch shanks. They also come in fine and coarse grit. They're used for refining the rough shapes. The second row is filled with 3 32nd-inch shank bits. There are ceram cut bluestones that are used for texturing hair, fur, or feathers, and diamond bits for fine detailing and putting in nostrils. The front row is also filled with small 3 32nd-inch shank bits. There are tapered fluted steel bits for shaping feathers, the smallest of the Typhoons for additional shaping, and ruby carvers for smoothing and very fine details.
I'd like to have you take a close look at this bit and note how aggressive a bit it is. This is a bit that we use for hogging and roughing out larger pieces of wood, such as what I'm holding. This bit does not care whether it cuts flesh or wood, and to that end I would like to show you proper technique for holding the handpiece. You may have observed carvers that are beginning carvers especially, that when they start removing stock with a flexible shaft or a power carving machine, they will wipe back and forth like this without any contact being made with the wood from the hand that they're gripping with. If you note, I'll demonstrate, if I were cutting like this, I have the greatest lack of control, because if you note, the control is clear back to my elbow. See where I'm pointing? Now, the minute I drop a control point, or a fulcrum if you will, my thumb, watch where the control goes. It's all up at the front of the shaft and where it belongs for control over a cut. Now, if I'm holding the handpiece in a pencil grip, the same thing applies. I don't want to be wiping back and forth like this, because eventually the rotation of the bit and hand fatigue or whatever may carry that bit over the end of the wood, and if it does, look what's there. My fingers are going to suffer for it. So even with a pencil grip, I will drop my finger as a control, a fulcrum, whatever you'd like to call it. Now look where, if I don't use it, the control is clear out to my elbow again. But when I do drop that, look how dramatic the control becomes by bringing the control up to the point of the handpiece. From time to time, you're going to want to either clean your bits or reshape them. The Typhoon bits are an easy clean, which I'll show you in a little bit. You just use a brass brush with those. The ruby carvers and diamonds, you can use easy off oven cleaner. You spray that on there and then scrub them with a toothbrush and then rinse them, and you've got them back to normal. One of the tougher ones to get clean are the stones, and I'd like to show you one that has been abused. But before I do that, let me show you the materials that I'll be using. This is a Carborundum shaping stone. These are diamond shaping boards, or diamond boards, and this is an abrasive cleaning block, very much like the old neoprene soles that were on some shoes. We'll start by cleaning this cylinder blue ceramic stone. At one time it was a beautiful blue. Now it has been so burned. Now when they burn or when they fill, you want to pay attention to them because they lose their effectiveness. And one such as this, the little voids in there that are the cutting voids, the edges of the granular pieces that compose the whole head of this bit, don't cut anymore because all those voids are filled with debris. So I have a choice. I can use the Carborundum stone and just touch it in here. To me, this is so abrasive and it wastes too much and changes the size of this bit so much that I prefer to use like the medium diamond stone. And it doesn't take a lot. Don't bear down on it. Just touch until you see cleanliness come. So I'll do that now. And you can see that beginning to clean. Now I'm not removing an awful lot from that, so I'm not losing a lot from the size of the stone, which adds to the longevity. And if I'm going to use this as a texturing stone, I'll just touch the front of it to sharpen that forward edge. Now, at a slower speed, you want to be very careful of this. I'll check now to see whether or not this is as clean as I want it and will be effective, be an effective bit again. I'll clean it. Now the reason for doing this and how this cleans is that the rubber gets into those little voids in there that are the cutting edges that provide the cut for this bit, and that's what cleans them out. Now be careful because, now see the dirt that's picking up? Be careful because that will actually dig in there if you go too fast, because it'll heat the rubber and it'll pull and the whole works will be twisted. That isn't quite as clean as I'd like it, so I'm going to go to just a hair more aggressive diamond, and you'll see that begin to clean much better, much better. There may come a time when you need a shape for a stone bit that you don't have in your bit collection. You can take specific shapes and modify them into other shapes. For example, right now I have need for a round nose that I don't have in my bit collection. So I will take this Carborundum stone, shaping stone, and using a slower speed and the appropriate sized slot, you see there are size slots throughout the stone. I'll choose the one that fits the size of the bit that I have. I'll start and I'll set that in there, and I'll just start rolling that back and forth, and you can see the Carborundum is much more aggressive than is the bit, and it only takes this long to make a perfectly round nose or bull-nosed shape on that Ceram cut. Now I'll still want to take my cleaning block, and again using a slow speed I want to just touch that in there to clean all those voids so that I have all the surfaces that I need will be cutting and not filled with debris. When I want to clean my larger bits like the Typhoons, the easiest, because of the configuration of the cutting teeth on this, the easiest way to clean them is with a brass brush, and it's superbly simple. I'll just start the machine, and using a fairly slow speed, I'll just run that across. Now again, you want to use a slow speed. That's fighting me now. It wants to roll out and go right around on my fingers. So I want to slow this down. Like this. And I actually prefer to do it this way. Now you still, without having the thing rotate, I can still take this See where I have some spots here that are pretty bad? I can scoop it down this way too if I want to. If I have to, I'll scrub it out of there. There. Now just one last pass so I get all the little things out of there. And the bit is clean. I can't stress enough the importance of good referencing for what you're going to carve. It's been a byline of mine in every book or every article that I've ever written. You can't carve what you don't know. I don't care if it's a rabbit, a duck, or a fish, or a human. You'll have to know your subject. You cannot carve what you don't know. So, to that end, let me show you some of the sources from which I've gathered references for what we're going to use on the tape. For the rabbit, for example, I used everything from outdoor magazines to artist sketches to calendars. There's not an old calendar safe anywhere from me if I see a subject that I can use. The mallard drake, for example, that we're going to be carving, I took these directly from the internet and enlarged them. They showed me everything and all the detail, for example, for the head of the mallard and for his body. Now, as far as the smallmouth bass that we're going to be carving, I took him directly from the lake. And as I bring them aboard, I'm at the point now where I can actually photograph a fish, catch it, photograph it, and release it still alive. And I can get, again, the very close-up that I need, the very closest. All I need to do is put the proper lens on my camera, and I can fill a frame with an eyeball, for example. And you need detail like this, or you'll not get the realism that you need in your carving. Now, the reference materials that I've shown you so far have allowed me to draw the details and the working plans that I've needed to complete the projects that we're going to do on this CD. And this is a quick look at those, which we'll use more later. And I'd also like to tell you that every pattern we use here is a part of my latest book, which are all the patterns of animals, birds, and fish that were ever carved during the duration of my time here at my woodcarving school. All right, starting with the references that we have on the cottontail rabbit, I have drawn the working plans that I want, and from the working plans I've taken the details that I need by Xeroxing them and enlarging or reducing them to make the templates that I need to outline the rabbit shape, top and side view, on a block of wood so that we can cut it out to get the carving blank that we need. Now, to do this, I simply took a glue stick and the whole sheet and a piece of poster board, and I just rubbed the glue stick on the back of it, stick it on a poster board, and then cut out that portion of the side view and the top view that will be a part of the carving blank, and I cut it out with a razor knife. When I'm outlining the template on the carving block, I like to use a soft lead pencil to get the darkest line I can get to follow when I'm cutting it out on the bandsaw. You want to ensure that the distance from here is the same as it is from to here. By that I mean make sure that both views are registered one to the other, and make sure that your grain is running in the direction that you want it. In this particular project, I want the grain strength to be through the ears because they are the most vulnerable, as is the tail, for example. Now I've outlined this and we're ready to go to the bandsaw, and everything is registered. I can see it well enough to cut it, and we'll go to the bandsaw and cut out our carving blank. Now you may notice that the rain has joined us here in the other shop where all the woodworking machinery is, and before we begin cutting our rabbit and our other blanks out, which is not a bad time on a rainy day to do, I'd like to discuss the bandsaw blades that I use and why I use them. I prefer a 1/4-inch blade and a skip tooth configuration because the 1/4-inch allows me to do sharper cuts within the block as I'm cutting, and the skip tooth configuration clears the cut as I'm cutting, and therefore the block doesn't bind on the blade itself. Usually when I'm carving blanks, I start with the side view because for the most part it's easier. But because of the intricacies and the difficulty of cuts that are on the top view of this rabbit, I'm going to start with the top cut. Now you notice I have 3 pieces. I have a bottom cut, I have a top cut, and then I have the top view cut of the carving blank. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to join these, but before I do that, let me remind you, as you're cutting, if you notice around here there's a lot of the line that I scribed on there, the pencil line showing. The reason for this is whether you're doing furniture or wood carving blanks, the rule is to cut to the line but not through it. Remember, to it but not through it, and that'll give you greater accuracy and integrity for the carving blank that you're cutting out. Now I'm ready to do my side view cut, and I have the 3 pieces joined together, and I'm going to wrap those with masking tape, then we'll cut out the side view. Now I've wrapped the block with masking tape, and I'm going to finish my wrap. You can use 1 or 2 wraps with the masking tape. Then you tear it off. And by using the masking tape, you can see I can still see through the masking tape so that I can follow my line, my outline of the project with the saw blade. So let's start cutting this out now. I want to set and adjust my blade guide assembly here so that I have about a 1/4 inch above the roller bearings above the carving block. Now the reason for this is not only does it stiffen up the blade a little bit, but if I feed my fingers in there, they're going to hit the roller blades before they hit my fingers. That's a safety feature. So let's cut this out. Now this is where the carving actually begins to come to life for me. I can see things now about the rabbit that I'm going to carve. I can see areas that are going to be removed. I can see areas where I'm going to detail. I can see areas where, as an artist, as a carver, I can show off. Once we've cut our carving blank, before we do any carving whatsoever, we have to establish lines of control. First, I do this by establishing a center line all the way around the blank, from nose to tail on bottom and top. And once I do that, then I start marking in those areas that I'm going to be removing or wasting away, and I like to cross hatch those, which I'll show you in a second. But first, let's draw our center line. Now, you can do this just on the strength of the accuracy of your eye, or some carvers like to take a flexible plastic ruler and draw it in like this. Personally, I prefer to allow my eyes to do this. Now that I've established my center line, you can see where I've got a baseline from which to work for all the accuracy that I need, not only from side to side, but from front to back, excuse me, and I can draw all my details using my templates if necessary. I'll establish those. So we're going to start drawing these in. Now, a point I'd like to make on most of my templates where I have to get detail from side to side, I will cut out those sections where I need detail just enough to allow my pencil to go through. For example, where the eyes are, if I want to establish those from side to side. Now, if I've cut my blank out accurately, which of course we have, now all I have to do is set this here, and I can just poke my pencil through here and establish an eyeball. And I can do the same thing on the other side by, again, using my template and running the pencil in here. Now I've established my eyes here. Now I can draw a line through this way, and this way. Now I can check from side to side and top from side to side and ensure that my eyes are the same distance back. Each one is the same distance back from the nose, and from side to side the same distance from the center line and up from the bottom. Now we'll start drawing the details of the rabbit's feet in here. Now, the easiest way to do this, you can either use your plastic ruler, or I like to use just my my finger to judge from the edge of the template into where I want to go for, say, the shoulder here. So now I can take this, come in here and say, all right, the shoulder is going to come out here, which it does on my cut, right about here. And then I'll take that same mark, and we're going to assume that it's the same on the other side. I'll start this, and what I'm going to do is I want to establish where the jowls are, where the cheek line is, and I didn't draw that in before. So I can draw these in and draw this like this, just to give me an indication of where they're going to go. I'll do the same thing on the other side. We already have the eye, establishing the jowl and the cheek line. And now I have all these marks. Now I can say my jowl line is going to come in off the nose roughly here and come down around here, and the cheek line is going to go out this way and up and around. Now, by following steps exactly as I've shown you throughout the rabbit, I mean to the shape of the tail, which we have on our working drawings, I can put the tail in. We know it's going to point up here. We know it's going to round out down here, and I can put this in, and I know that I want to get rid of this area right in here, so I'll cross hatch it. And I know this area has to go, so I'll cross hatch it. And I'll cross hatch this. And I'll do this over the entire rabbit so that I know exactly what I'm going to cut out, and there'll be no errors. Now I've drawn all the limits, if you will, of the details and those areas where I want to remove or waste away wood. And again, I have cross-hatched each area throughout so I know exactly where I can make my cuts, and I'm near ready to carve. But before I do this, I want to, oh, here's an area that I left out. We might as well get that right now. And you can see the high-tech cross hatching method that I use. Believe me, everything we're doing here is not rocket science. And as you do this, as you're from everything from wasting out to actually finishing the project, enjoy it. Now, all I want to do is check within my working drawing and say, all right, yes, I've got the rabbit's paw. The outline of it is shaped pretty much how I want it for rough shaping. The ears, I know where I'm going to block these out. I know where my tail is going to be shaped now, basically from the tail shape that I've drawn on my working drawings. And now we're ready to begin carving. I am fortunate enough over the years to have accumulated enough hand pieces so that I can set up those bits that I want for a particular sequence so that I don't have to stop and reload each hand piece. Now for this particular project and for starting the initial cuts, we're going to use a small flame-shaped Typhoon, a large flame-shaped Typhoon, a cylinder smooth end small, and a cylinder smooth end large. Those areas that demand a particular shape for removal of stock will dictate which handpiece and which bit of the four that I've chosen and set up in preparation for removal to use. Now I'm going to put my handpiece on the machine. I've selected the smooth end cylinder to begin carving with. I'll turn on my air and I'll get that going. And we'll have a little bit of noise here when the dust collector has enough power to make that noise. And then we'll start roughing out. Notice how my thumb is always on the carving so I can exercise control at the bit where it belongs. Okay, I've finished rough shaping those areas of the rabbit that I want to deal with at this time. I have used 4 different shapes, the large and small Typhoon flame shapes and the large and small cylinder. I finished up, as you saw, with this handpiece with the 1/8 flame shaped Typhoon, and this is the finer gridded one. I have the tail roughly shaped. I have the feet relieved away so I know where they are, both front and rear. I've cut away those areas where I have just begun to define the ears, the neck, and I have where I started on the back on both sides. I'm beginning to get the rough shape of the rabbit. While we were off camera, I rough carved every area that I wanted to, but I think I should show you which bits I used to accomplish this. To begin with, I used the large smooth end cylinder bit, and I took out these areas on the back just to begin the rounding process. If you notice, we're beginning to follow a sequence of steps. First, the carving still is very square, and eventually we'll begin to round it out. I used this smooth end to get the back on both sides. I used the smooth end to come in and trace the outline of the ear, and the smooth end allowed me to stay here without cutting further, and I outlined the ears with this particular bit all the way. Then I switched to my large bit and I started cutting out in here under on the neck where all of that large curly coarse hair is on the rabbit. Then I went to the smooth end cylinder, the small one, the 1/8, and I began to cut around the feet in these areas and up in this area. Then I used the 1/8 flame-shaped Typhoon to reestablish these areas, to soften them down where the feet are sinking up into the stomach, to cut in the areas of the tail, to define the shoulder areas, and to bring down a little bit more of the ruff on the neck. I'm ready to define all the contour lines that I've drawn on the rabbit. The general shape of the ears, the jowl, the cheek, the eye valley, the rough shape of each of the paws, define the hips, begin to shape the back and the tail. And I'm going to start this using my large flame shape, and I want to caution you as you're working around the ears to work carefully and have in your mind a predetermined shape of how you want the ears, how they fold, what direction you want the openings. I'm going to have the openings back at like 45-degree angles, so I'll be able to cut in at this angle. So let's start this, and we'll define these, and then I'll go over the bits again with you. Here again, notice how I have the handpiece anchored with my little finger, using it as a fulcrum. That allows me to make accurate cuts rather than try to go like this way without any contact with the carving. To recap what we used to establish the contours of the rabbit, I started with the large flame-shaped Typhoon, and I cut in not only the direction or slope of the ears, but the general shape of the outside of the front of the ears. I rounded the hips down and the shoulders and worked a little bit more in the neck area. Then I went to my smaller flame-shaped Typhoon 1/8 shaft, and I established the beginnings of the indentations of the ears, where the actual opening of the ear is, opened a little bit behind the ears, shaped the shoulders, shaped the hips, and shaped the tail, took out a little bit more around the paws, and that's what I used to do it. Now, to finish smoothing out these areas, I used the flame-shaped ruby carver and began to shape, do indentations, smooth out this area where I know I'm going to be putting in an eye, to bring these areas together, and all those areas where I wanted to begin a smooth cut. Now, we're going to have to put in areas of rough hair. Now, what is rough hair compared to the rest of the rabbit? As this animal moves, the shoulder, for example, will rub against the side of the neck in this area, or the lower front leg. The hips will rub against the stomach in this area. The hind paw will rub up against part of the hip. The tail, even where he sits on the ground, will develop areas of roughness where the hair is actually formed into little groups that just looks like much rougher hair than what's found on the rest of the animal. This area from the bottom of the chin down to where it meets the chest is also an area of roughness. So let's draw these in, and then we'll begin to cut those in, and then we're ready to establish our flow lines for hair. We can begin to texture, and once we do our texturing, we've pretty much finished our project. So let's draw these in. I want rough hair here. I want rough hair along the tail where it's split. I want rough hair coming up the back of the legs where they meet the body. Some rough hair coming off here down onto what are called the flags, or the rough hair at the back of the legs. A little bit of rough hair in here. Rougher hair that's coming off here and down this way. And now we'll get ready I'll draw all of these in, and then we'll get ready to cut these areas in. So I'll begin cutting where I've already started. I hope the shadow will hold on the light here. And I just want to make these random cuts. I don't want any pattern or any real uniformity to these. I hope you can see them, if you can see where the shadow light's casting the shadow. You notice I'm cutting on the forward stroke and the rear stroke. This is how I texture hair, fur, and feathers for that matter. Now you can see where I put in areas of coarse hair. Now I'm going to texture over this with a finer bit, and it'll actually knock some of this out, but the ends will still look coarse. A better shot probably would be to show you cutting the tail in like that. And making those nice separations that make the tail really stand out. So I'll continue doing this, and I'll be back in just a second.
The material that follows is a tutorial on carving facial details in the setting of eyes. In this segment, Frank works on the cottontail rabbit. However, the same techniques can be applied to any other animal. You'll want to refer back to this segment when the time comes to complete the face of the duck and the basque.
The development of the head of our rabbit, with respect to the eyes and their placement and installation, the jaw, the nostrils, and the nose proper. I've drawn in from my working plans and from the photographs, reference photographs, I've drawn the details that I want to carve out and relieve away from the head. I've started the eyes just to give me an idea where the eyes are going to go. The eye holes are not to size, and I plan to show you by cutting them in and sizing them to the eyes that we're going to use. And then when I get that done, we're going to actually set the eyes and embed them with an epoxy putty. Any part of this can be done with the flexible shaft that we've been using all along. The flexible shaft, I have two sized hand pieces that go with it, and they each come with the larger one. The large hand piece that I have comes with 3 collets, 3/32, a 1/8, and a 1/4, which will allow me to use the whole spectrum of bits that I use as a wood carver. The smaller hand piece that goes to the flexible shaft comes with 3/32 and 1/8, which still will allow me to do all the finer detail work that I plan to do on this rabbit's head and cut the eyes in. When I'm cutting in the nostrils, shaping the entire nose and the jaw line, I prefer to use a micromotor, a high-speed with a high-speed handpiece, such as shown here. This is the Fordham model 1070. And it goes from 500 RPMs to 38,000 RPMs. And I use 2 bits in here. I use a very small ball to actually cut in the nostril holes, and then I use a very small diamond flame shape to cut the sweeps and the detail of the mouth. So let's do that now. And as with setting the eyes, I always tell my students this: one nostril is extremely easy to carve. It's the second one that make it match that is the more difficult. The same thing with an eye. One eye is nothing to set. It's matching the second one that's difficult. So let's put our nostril holes in. And I use these at full bore. By full bore, I mean the high RPM at all times, because the higher the RPM, the smoother the cut with these particular bits. So I'm just going to touch, and then I'm actually going to plunge that bit in. And now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And now I have my 2 nose holes in there. Now I'll change my bits and I'll do the sweeps from the nostrils. I'll do the sulcus, which is that little depressed area, down to the jaw, and then I'll cut in the jaw line itself. Now that I've established the nostril holes, I want to provide those sweeps that come away from the holes or the nostrils out underneath the nose, that allows the rabbit, for example, when he's running, to enlarge his nostrils as he needs more air, or to close and be in a natural position. And I'm going to cut those in by just setting the flame-shaped bit and just dragging it along that line. And you can see, we'll show a closer look at this after, and you'll be able to see how these nostrils are shaped now, or these sweeps, and how they contribute to the shape of the nostril and therefore the realism. There. The nostrils are cut in. Now I'm going to cut in the sulcus, that little depression that leads from the bottom of the nostrils down to the top of the jaw. And I'm just going to lay this bit sideways, the same bit that I did the sweeps on the nostril with, and I'm going to do a little drag stroke here. And that's all I need to do to establish that. And again, I'll show you a closer view of this when I finish these details. Now, I'm going to turn the rabbit and I'm going to trace the lines that I've drawn and establish the jawline. And I'm just going to continue the initial groove that I made along the pencil line. I'm going to address the sulcus where it hits the upper lip, and then I'm going to deepen the groove on the jawline on the other side. And then I'm going to erase and slightly shape that jawline to round it out, and just give the indication that it sets up inside and comes up to meet the upper mandible. I'm going to establish that line where the hair comes down to meet the fleshy part of the nose. And I'm just going to sweep across that to create the slightest ledge. And I'm going to bring that ledge right down along the side of the head to almost join the first sweep that we made. Then I'm going to, let me get rid of the pencil line here, and that'll show you that the ledge is actually coming to shape. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. You want to check from side to side as you're doing this to make sure that you're maintaining symmetry. Now, in actuality, this may not happen on the real rabbit, but your static carving is going to just boldly announce, I'm out of balance if you don't do this. To give you a better idea of how we're going to set the eyes, I'd like to show you graphically on the board first. First, let's say this is the side view with the eye valley. This could be a duck, this could be the side of a rabbit, it could actually be the front of, say, a bird or an owl. This would be a cross section, so I'll just show it like this. Now what we're going to do first is we're going to size the eye, and you can use a circle template or actually trace around, take the eye out of the bag, trace around the eye with a sharp pencil, but then putting the eye back in the bag. Now next we're going to cut, let me get a different piece of chalk here, and we're going to cut a concave hole. Something like that. So now we've cut that hole in there. And let me draw this again. And we've sized our eye to the hole so that the eye will actually go into the hole. Now we're going to, now that we've sized the eye and the hole, we're going to fill the hole, or the cavity if you will, with epoxy bedding compound. And I like to use the Quickwood brand, 5 and 20 minute. Now I'm going to push the eye in, and what's going to happen is this compound is going to squirt out around here, because by sizing the hole and leaving the eye in the bag, I've created this little space here that allows the compound to go out the sides here. Then, once the eye is set to the depth I want, that I usually use 1/3 the diameter of the eye. So if this is 9mm eye, I would want the eye to protrude 3 millimeters, or like about that much. Now, once the eye is bedded and it sets where I want it, and it's plumb up and down and back and forth, or at the angle you want, that doesn't make it look grotesque, of course. My 5-minute epoxy that I used to begin with is pretty well set now. And now I'll take the 20-minute epoxy and I'll form a rope. And I'm going to wrap the rope around the eye in this manner. And then I'll take the modeling tool and I will shape the eyelids down to the size, blend them back into the surface of the eye hole, and I'll shape the eyelids however they are for a particular whatever carving I've done. You'll gain everything you need. You will gain from your reference photos to show you the shape of the eye and the eyelids. There may be an opening in the front of the eyelid, or the eyelid may be split from top to bottom at the rear of the eye. And you can gain all of this from proper reference photos. Now we're going to set the eyes. First we have to determine the size of the eye that we're going to use, and according to this particular pattern I'm using a 10 millimeter brown, or this size pattern, and I'm going to cut the eye. I need to cut that concave hole that we talked about on the blackboard, and to do this I'm going to use a ruby ball that is roughly the size of the concave that I want inside the hole. You want to always keep the eyes in the bag they came in and fit them through the bag. The bag will act as a spacer, so that when you're putting the eye in, you see it doesn't quite go in there, but it wants to so far. And I'll just pull that and I'll keep using this eye in the bag to fit it until it just slides in there. The spacer of the bag will actually allow me to pull the eye back out when and if I want to. And then when I'm bedding the eye, it provides the space needed for the epoxy putty underneath, the bedding material, to squirt out around the eye, which will allow me to take it out and away with my modeling tool. So let's fit this eye. And I need a little bit more. If you can see that well, I need a little bit more concave, because that concave is what actually locks the eye in there once the bed of epoxy or bedding material hardens. So now I've established the concave to the point that I want. Now just barely touching the outer edges of the eye. Incidentally, if you look around the eye closely, you'll see I've textured, even though I haven't finished the rest of the rabbit, the texturing, I've textured around the eye. And you want to do this so that you don't have to go back once the eye is in and set, so you don't have to be working around that eye with a rotating bit, which will ruin it if you just touch the eye. To that end, it's best to texture the entire project before you set the eyes. But I need to set this in sequence for you to observe, so I'm doing it a hair out of sequence. So I've touched around the edges of the eye, and I've got to fit the eye, and just barely will slide in now. Now, it's a little tighter than I want. That's why the bag is so useful, just to use it as a handle to pull out. I'm going to dress it a little bit larger, and by doing so, I'm creating edges around that concave. So now I got to go reestablish some of the concave. Now his eye should fit perfectly. And there it is. Now it looks a little large, and it will, whether you're doing a rabbit or a bird or whatever to begin with, because there's no lid on there. It's just the round eyeball, which makes it look unnatural. But it's just right at this point in time, and the size of the eye is right for the rabbit. Now I'm going to start bedding it. I'm going to be using as a setting material, or as a mounting material, a product known as Quickwood. I'm going to be using the 5-minute to bed with, and I'll be using the 20-minute to form the eyelids with. I have the only tool I've ever used to set eyes, large or small, whether it's a large owl or a tiny little cat that I've carved. I use nothing more than a 1/4 inch dowel that has an angle cut at the end to form a wedge shape, and is sharpened with a pencil sharpener at the other end with an indentation so that I can set it against the eye, as you'll see, and actually steer the eye so it's either plumb or set deeper, or however I want to maneuver the eye once I have it in the bedding compound. When I'm done bedding the eyes, every time I have a little bit left over, I roll it into a ball. And the reason for this is I set that ball aside and it hardens. Then I don't have to come back and touch the eyes or anything to do with the eyes. I can just check that little ball of extra epoxy and it hardens, and the hardness of it. Now I've mixed up the bedding material, the epoxy putty, and I'm just going to plunge the ball of it into the eye like this, and I'm going to actually just wipe away what I don't want. Now the hole is full, and I have this little extra that I talked about. I'm just going to take that off my fingers, roll it into a ball, and set it aside so I can check its hardness from time to time. Then I'm going to pick up my eye, set it against the bedding material, and start to push in with my thumb, and you can see how it squirts out around the eye. Then I'm going to take the end of my modeling tool and actually push that eye in until I'm at a point that satisfies how I want the eye to protrude. I got to get rid of some of this, so I'll just take it off here. And you can see just by setting the eye that much how much realism is coming to the rabbit. I've got to push that in a little more. I'm using a little too much pressure here. I'm actually steering the eye so it's plumb up and down this way. You don't want it cocked down, you don't want it cocked out. Now I'll take the excess away. I try to use the eye sticking out away from the rabbit, out of the eye hole, about 1/3 the diameter of the eye. And that seems to satisfy any and all of the carvings that I do. I'll clean this out. And once I get this all cleaned off here, I'm using the wedge end of my high-tech modeling tool here, my 1/4 inch dowel. Now the eye is going to have some film on it from the epoxy. See, and I'm checking that from side to side. And the eye will have a little bit of film on it. Don't worry about that, because once the epoxy sets up, once it dries, then you can actually wipe that off by using the tip of your modeling tool, and you can see the film that's on there, and that'll actually take it right off. Now I have the eye bedded in the manner that I want. I'm going to check my epoxy, and it's rock hard now, and it's been 5 minutes, as you can see. So now I'm going to start doing my eyelids. Now I've mixed up the 20-minute epoxy paste that I'm going to use to do the rabbit's eyelids. In order to do this, I'm going to make a rope, and the only way I can do this is just to roll it in my fingers like this until I get generally the size rope that I want. And I'm beginning to get the size that I want for this particular size eyelid. Then I take the rabbit and the rope, and I lay the rope on the eye, pick up my high-tech modeling tool, cut off what I don't need, and now I'm ready to start modeling the eyelid. And I pinch off on the top of the eyelid what I don't want first, and I begin to shape by pushing back, letting the eye guide me and pushing back on it like this. Now I'll go ahead and finish this, and when we come back we'll have an eye completely set. Now I've formed the eyelids, and how I formed them to begin with, as a quick review, I pushed here and swept away. And once I got the general shape of the eyelid, I put the modeling tool on the eyelid itself and just gently bump the eyelid into not only shape but position. And I'll just sweep around, sweep that out. I'll turn the modeling tool sideways and clean out where I've textured, where it got filled a little bit with epoxy bedding. And then I'll address the lower eyelid. Now, to say that I do this exactly this way every time would be wrong. Sometimes I do the lower eyelid first, but I pinch this off again to shape the lower part of the lower eyelid. Then I'll take the eye, using the eye as a guide. I'll push it back until I get the opening of the eye that I want between the upper and lower eyelids. Now I've finished the eye. There's the easy one, and there was the harder one.
This ends Disc 1. Disc 2 begins with a tutorial on texturing fur.